Greetings gamers, my name is Santo and today we're going to be doing some world building for the Dual Cities of Talavar and expanding on the Howling Badlands region. This video is sponsored by me and my Patreon. If you want to get the chance to suggest video topics as well as get access to my monthly magazine SIDEQUEST, where you'll get access to a bunch of GM and player focused content, sign up using the link down in the description below, but more on that later. So I asked the folks over on my Patreon what you want to see next, and the thing they voted on was this video, which is me going over the world building process for expanding my Howling Badlands region, which is one of the nations in the Dual Cities of Talavar, which is my current homebrew campaign setting. I've talked about it a couple of times on the channel in the past. I'll link a video to that right here, and this is actually the second time that I've recorded this video. In the first one I took a much more literal approach where I sat down and on camera kind of went through the whole process, and I realized that unlike my Twitch streams, it's really just kind of boring to watch that when there's no audience interaction. So we're taking a different approach, and I'm going to kind of walk you through what that process was, and hopefully it'll be much more interesting this time rather than just watching me do it live without any of the audience interaction that we get in our Twitch streams. So the Howling Badlands is one of the regions in the Dual Cities of Talavar, which is my ongoing campaign setting that I've been running my Pathfinder 2nd edition game in for about a year now, and we've been developing in Twitch streams for about 2 years now. There's maybe 560, 570 unique locations and point of interests across the entire map at this point, and not all of them are super well developed. Some of them are just bullet points, but some have been pretty well developed through the Twitch streams, and I thought it'd be a good idea to make a video where I go through the process of how I take one of these regions and develop it out into something that my players can actually engage with. Because a lot of the time when I make videos about my campaign setting, people see this map filled with hundreds of pins, and they see my general approach, which is a very top-down approach. I design kind of the whole world and then drill down, and they say, oh, that's not realistic, I don't want to waste all of this time developing all of this stuff. And I want to sort of show that that's not actually how I really will build. I will go very wide at first, shallow as a puddle, wide as an ocean, and then drill down. So even though from the surface it looks like the Dual Cities is expansive and filled with so much detail, a lot of it is there solely to provide a jumping off point for me to improvise. And that's what I want to kind of show you today, how I take some of those jumping off points and how I will use them to improvise my way through sessions. The reason I'm doing this is because my players will soon be going to the Howling Badlands. They have a long-term quest to go there, and for one of the players, who is a Cinder Dwarf who hails from the Howling Badlands, to return a legendary artifact that is once belonged to the king of the Cinder Dwarves. He wants to return that to the Howling Badlands and deliver that to the king of the Cinder Dwarves. So I have several goals with this session of world building that I've done for the Howling Badlands, and I think it's important to set yourself goals while you're world building so you don't find yourself kind of building out the 14th dynasty of the papal mainframe when really all you needed was to just know what magic items the local vendor had. It's happened to me before, I'm sure it's happened to you, and it's a really easy trap to fall in. So having clear, concrete goals when you set out to do some world building can help keep you focused and help narrow down the things that you're doing. So for this process with the Howling Badlands, I had 3 main goals. The first was that I wanted to build a location that was unique and distinct to the other locations in my campaign setting. I wanted somewhere that was different to the other locations in the Dual Cities of Talavar, but I also wanted a desert, which is what the Howling Badlands is. It's a desert region that felt different to the desert region that my previous campaign took place in, Ashk. My players spent like 2 years adventuring in that desert, and I don't want them to go to another desert and feel like, oh, every desert in this world is exactly the same. My second goal is to provide myself a jumping off point to improv while I'm in the session. I don't need super deep world building detail for this. This is how I prefer to approach my world building details for my actual game sessions, and it's how I like to build out my campaigns. Short, evocative information that I can build on the fly and then fill in after the fact. And then my third goal is to make my Cinder Dwarf player, the party wizard, feel special. This is their homeland. They're returning home for the first time in the campaign, and I want them to feel special and to feel like they are a part of that world and that they have something to contribute to that the other players don't. So to be able to do this, I needed a plan, and fortunately I already have a system set up to do this, and that is the Doppelganger system. This is an acronym-based world building system that essentially gives you a bunch of prompts for you to use in your world building to give you a starting point, and it's freely available. I'll leave a link down in the description below, and I use this to give myself a jumping off point, start weaving together all of this information to give myself that jumping off point to start creating an idea for how I wanted to run some campaign sessions in the Howling Badlands. I already knew some things about this region. It was once known as the Eltrith Dominion, a lush and verdant forest, and then over 1,000 years ago, a war between the elves and the dwarves over this red gemstone substance known as cinder resulted in a colossal magical explosion that absolutely wiped out the forest and turned it into this irradiated desert. And that irradiated desert element was one that I really wanted to focus on. This idea that it had been magically changed forever, and that there was this magical fallout that completely changed everything in the ecology of this region, from the wildlife to the plant life and even the peoples that live there. So both the dwarves and the elves that live in this region have this red hue to their skin from long-term exposure to cinder, which has been blasted throughout the region and is found all throughout the sand, and there's still big deposits underground. The dwarves ingest this cinder, so they have much deeper red skin than the elves. They use it to delay the natural petrification process that happens at the end of their lives, and it kind of drives them mad, and it's a big part of their culture. Whereas the elves kind of consume it passively because it's in the water, it's in the soil and the ground, so anything that grows there, anything they consume has trace elements of cinder. So over the 1,000 years plus that this has been going on, they've slowly kind of taken this into their body, and their skin has started to change to reflect living with cinder all around them. I also already knew the region is called the Howling Badlands because it said that you can hear the screams of the dead on the night air. So this is a region where magic has so badly scarred the land that you can hear echoes of that horror on the night winds. So I spent a little bit of time, I spent a couple of hours, really not that much time, using the Doppelganger system to build on what I already knew about the region and to answer some of the questions in the Doppelganger system to give me an idea of what was going on within the Howling Badlands. And by the time I was finished, I had a great starting point, and then I spent about 30 minutes linking all of that information that I'd come up with using the Doppelganger system back to my 3 goals so that I had something really usable for my games. So the 3 things that I wanted to get out of this was I wanted a region that was distinct, I wanted something that was a great starting point for improvisation, and I wanted something that made the party wizard feel special. So in terms of making this region feel distinct, I had a couple of different avenues that I wanted to go down. The first of which is that magical radiation, and one of the ways that I think it's really going to come out is through monsters. So if we think about taking this as a nuclear fallout allegory, so this magical fallout, this fallout of the cinder explosion, the way that this has seeped into the ground and the air and the water and the creatures over the course of 1,000 years, there's going to be some creatures that live within the Howling Badlands that have been twisted and changed beyond recognition because of their exposure to this material. And that's going to be one of the ways that we can make this region feel really different to anywhere else my players have been. I can introduce them to monsters that are just unlike anything they have ever seen before. Fortunately, we're running a different system this time around than our previous campaign, which took place in a desert. That one was using 5th edition. This one's using Pathfinder 2nd edition. So I have a lot of monsters that my players have never seen before to introduce them to that concept of these aberrations that have been twisted by the presence of the irradiated cinder. The next way that I am going to make this region feel different to anywhere else in the Jewel Cities is with weather. I use a bunch of different OSR tools to randomly generate weather for my players each session so that they always feel like they're ingrained in the world a little bit. So when they get to the Howling Badlands, me describing the weather isn't going to be something completely out of the ordinary. They are used to that, but the kinds of weather that they're going to encounter is going to be out of the ordinary. So I'm talking magical storms, winds that go at hundreds of miles an hour and can deal damage and that they'll have to hide from. Red lightning that is kind of charging all of the particles of cinder in the air that strikes the sands and makes these stalagmites of crystallized cinder where it's fused all of the particles in the sands, and then you get these towers of crystallized cinder that rise out of the desert. The howling voices, so at night they're going to be able to hear the howling of the dead, and that might kind of chip away at their fortitude and their reserves, and they might have to make will saves or become frightened by that, and there's a lot of elements that we can play around with in that respect. And then there's the cinder of it all. So cinder as a material is a really interesting one. Like I said, it delays this petrification process in the dwarves. I've already established that it is a self-propagating material, so if there is enough of it in one place, it can grow more. That makes it really attractive to hoard because you can grow farms of this weird magical gemstone, but it also means that the dwarves that use it to delay their petrification have great industries to process it, to mine it. When they are walking through the desert, the players, they're going to see these stalagmites of cinder from the lightning strikes, and they'll see teams of dwarves go in there to harvest those. They'll see great dwarven sand crawlers like the spice crawlers from Dune going through the desert and trying to comb up all of the trace elements of cinder to be able to refine into larger amounts. And that technological element is something that's going to come up quite a lot in regards to the contrast between the elves and the dwarves. The dwarves are very industry forward. They are very much, we want to use science, technology, and magic to strip the cinder from the earth to meet our own gains. Whereas the elves are very much the opposite. They want to return this land back to its verdant green nature, return the forests of the Eltrice Dominion. They are much more concerned with restoring the natural balance than the dwarves are. And then the other element that I really want to focus on in the Howling Badlands is the god of death, Ket the Mutilator. So this is a region that has seen more than its fair share of death. And I really like the idea that there's this whole superstition that people have seen an avatar, this towering monolithic creature, this physical manifestation of the god of death, which walks the sands and picks through carrion at the battle sites that are dotted all throughout the Howling Badlands, and that it is one of the only examples within the Jewel Cities of one of the gods taking kind of direct intervention. This ties into my players pretty well, which I'll talk about when we talk about how we're going to integrate this region in with the wizard, but they have encountered agents of the god of death already. So we get this opportunity to bring up the god of death again and have it be a recurring theme, and maybe we can even develop it into being a recurring villain presence through the cults that are dedicated to the god of death throughout the Badlands, and this third faction that is operating separate to the elves and the dwarves that constantly wants them at war with each other to propagate the death that is kind of everywhere in this region. This video is sponsored by me and my monthly RPG magazine, SIDEQUEST. I grew up reading gaming magazines like Dungeon and Dragon and White Dwarf, and SIDEQUEST is my love letter to those magazines of old. And it's my goal that in every issue you come away with something that inspires you to go and create for your own worlds. Whether it's new fantastic locations, short adventures, new NPCs to include in your game, new terrifying monsters to hound your party in the depths of night, every issue of SideQuest is going to contain something that you can use in your next session, whether it's mechanics, lore, or just plain inspiration. The latest issue is live right now and includes a gazetteer about the Dusk Empire region of the Jewel Cities, includes a new iconic hero from our line of iconic adventurers, as well as a new monster that could be friend or foe for your campaigns. And at the end of this month with the next issue, I'm going to have a full write-up on the Howling Badlands, as well as some of the people and monsters that live there. So sign up to get access to every issue as soon as it's released down in the description below, and at the $10 tier you can access the entire back catalogue. In terms of our second goal, a groundwork that I can improvise off, we have a lot to go off there. I already know a lot about what the dwarves want. In the short term, they want the return of the Cinderclaw Gauntlet. This is a weapon, a magical artifact once wielded by the Cinder King that has been lost, and they want to return that because it has the power to speed up this propagation of Cinder and make Cinder replicate itself, and would vastly speed up their production. In the medium term, the Cinder Dwarves want to wipe out the Eltrife Elves. They are long-term enemies and they want to deal with the elves once and for all. And then in the long term, the Cinder Dwarves want to establish a new empire and spread all across Talabar. Conversely, I also know what the elves want. They want to find a way to rid the world of what they see as the Cinder menace. They want to find a way to transmute all of the Cinder, making it so that the dwarves have no reason to stay in this region and forcing them to leave. They want to find some spell or means of magic that would transform all of the Cinder in this region into some other material. And then they want to reseed the land and rebuild their forests. In each of the nomadic tribes of elves that live throughout the Howling Badlands, their most prized possessions are their seed vaults. So each of them keeps this bank of forgotten seeds from the time of the Eltrife Dominion, these long extinct species of plant that they hope to be able to reseed the land with someday and rebuild their ancestral homes. And then I also know what Ket, the god of death and mutilation, wants. He wants to just keep fueling this war between the other two factions and create a cycle of endless death. And then in terms of the third goal, how to make the party wizard feel special, I've already inadvertently laid a lot of the groundwork for that. So months ago now, the party found the Cinderclaw Gauntlet. At this point, I didn't know how important it was going to be to the plotline of the Howling Badlands. I threw it in as just a nice reward for the party wizard. But they have found the Cinderclaw Gauntlet. They have witnessed its ability to propagate Cinder and it being used to create other Cinder weaponry and other sources of Cinder. And that is why they are returning to the Howling Badlands. They are going to give that to the Cinder King. And we're going to get the opportunity to explore some really interesting stuff there with the Cinder King. Is the Cinder King going to welcome back the party wizard and thank them for returning the gauntlet? Or does Cinder make them paranoid? And is he going to think of the party wizard as a usurper who holds the gauntlet and is making a play for the throne? But then we also have the element that one of the party wizard's main goals through this campaign is to rid the Cinder Dwarves of the need and the reliance on Cinder. They want to find some other material that they can use to delay the petrification of their people without all of the side effects. Cinder has this tendency to drive people to violent extremes and eventual madness, and the party wizard wants to find a way around that, and that is going to run counter to what the Cinder King wants. He wants this industry of Cinder that he controls and allows him to control his people. So we could have an opportunity for the party wizard to actually side with the elves, which would be a really interesting play on that. So I know that I need to seed the idea of some kind of transmutational property as soon as possible. I need the players to interact with some study or some magic, something that shows them that this powerful transmutation of being able to turn cinder into some other material is possible, so that when they get to the Howling Badlands and when they interact with the Eltrite elves, and those elves suggest that that's what they want to do, the players know it is possible, and the party wizard has the opportunity to go, I know this is possible, it aligns with what I want to do, I will help you, and put myself in direct opposition to the Cinder King. One option for this is potentially the Deck of Many Things. I recently introduced some cards from the Deck of Many Things to my players in this campaign. I talked about that in my review video of the recent Deck of Many Things book, which I really enjoyed, and there are a lot of possibilities in that. And the Deck of Many Things is a great tool for this kind of world-changing magic, because anything that you pull from the deck, no player is going to be surprised at the power that it has. And then finally, without really meaning to, my players have had interactions with Agents of Ket before. One of the temporary characters that one of my players was controlling and who eventually died had some connection to the god of Ket, and the players have interacted with his ravens, which are these celestial creatures that exist to balance the scales of fate. If someone escapes their predestined death, the ravens of Ket are dispatched to kill them and restore the balance of the cosmos. So the group has already encountered these ravens. One of the ravens killed one of the player characters, so they have already had an interaction with followers of Ket. So when they arrive in the Howling Badlands and there's a lot more agents of Ket, there's a lot of juice that we can get out of that, either from the point of view of, oh, you've encountered some of my followers, so here's a glimpse into more of my world, or, oh, you've encountered some of my followers, you are marked, I'm going to continue to try and kill you. So overall, I'm really excited for my players to get to the Howling Badlands, and I feel really good about the groundwork that I've done for building out the world building of this region, and how it is going to enable me to take all of those small little points of interest that I've dotted over the map already that have no real world building to them, and improvise on top of them. So now when I click on a particular pin on my map, and let's say it's an abandoned fort, and the prompt up until this point says that it's evident that no one has lived here in years and the inside is filled with corpses. Now I can take the context that I have from this world building session and say, what from this session can I use to inform this point of interest on the map? In this case, I might go, oh, maybe this is a site that has been cursed by Ket. Maybe there was some great battle here, and when the players arrive at this abandoned fort, they'll see a bunch of sigils that mark this as being a place claimed by the god of mutilation, and now there's actually a cult operating from the bowels of the dungeons beneath this fort. And if I do that with each of the pins that my players travel through as they work their way across the map, they'll end up with a really unique experience that fulfills all of the project goals I had with this world building session. So I hope that you found that look at my process for expanding on a region in my homebrew world really interesting. Let me know what you think of the Howling Badlands down below. If you haven't already, check out my doppelganger video where I go over that entire world building process, because I think it is really useful if you're stuck on where to start with your world building. But until next time, happy gaming.